More than 190 flood alerts and warnings have been issued across England and Wales as Britain braces for torrential rain and further flooding on Boxing Day.
You never really thought that it was going to come up and up and up and up.
Don't think we still believed what was actually happening.
It was very, very stressful and very emotional.
My thoughts were somewhere there is going to be a flood today. I didn't actually hear the weather forecast. I knew it had been raining for a few days.
In terms of preparing and dealing with the flood, that's part of our routine activity. So we would send out alerts and our warnings from the incident room here.
Once we got the flood alert calls, then I was quite concerned then, because they give you varying degrees of seriousness, and they had sort of warned us that it was going to be bad.
That really made me feel that we were going to get something that we've never had before.
And my initial thoughts was, I'm going to be in for a rough ride.
When I got up and took the dog out in the morning, the army were circulating, and we then heard that they told people they were going to be evacuated about 1 o'clock.
I came down into the village and looked at the river. Obviously the river was rising.
The water was very near the top.
I'd said to my husband that we're supposed to go to a party at my brother-in-law's, but I said to him we can't go until we know that river's going to be all right.
The two avenues up there was then already, there was surface water, so obviously the grids weren't taking the water.
Because we'd had the call, the whole village were out helping to keep the level of the water down on the drains, because the drains were coming up from the river.
We did everything we could as far as sandbags and storm boards and things like that were available to us then. But within 15 minutes, the water was overlapping our ankles.
Probably 20, 30 minutes later, this side of the village had completely flooded.
And by that time, we were flooding, so we couldn't stop it. We had no resources or anything.
At that stage, it got out of hand, and we just had to give in to the river coming over the top.
From a very early stage, we worked with colleagues from the Environment Agency, other emergency services and community groups in the town.
And the police were here to close the village because the river had come up so high that it had become a dangerous situation.
And they just said, look, you're going to be flooded, so you might as well get in the houses upstairs or get out the village now.
Going out and assessing, what resources went where, because we only have a finite resource to us.
So straight away I'm ringing up, trying to get hold of people that aren't necessarily on call.
Obviously it was over the Christmas period, so the big thing was that there was nobody in work, only our emergency response team. So therefore we had to mobilise very, very quickly.
It's a big call for local authorities to say, forget your dinner and get out your house, so I had quite a lot of sympathy for the authorities in play.
And we set together a strategy where we would utilise the volunteers to go out to the areas of our community that we know very well was at high risk of being affected.
We were setting up temporary defences, we were manning the assets that we've got, we were cleaning grids, we were out helping the communities.
Instigating their flood plans, moving furniture, lifting carpets where we could, moving their cars, and then assisting moving them to places of safety like reception centres.
Our main focus was providing those shelters such as the town hall and the leisure centre where people could go and stay for a couple of days whilst their properties were still underwater on many occasions.
The community were really engaged and they really worked with us to move when we wanted them to move, to ensure that the area was safe.
We produced a list of the people that we thought that the fire people should know that they'd need to evacuate.
And obviously we focused on the more vulnerable tenants, and if we needed to move them into hotels or alternative accommodation with families.
People we know in the village, we went into the businesses and into the homes and started helping them.
I was at a standstill, but obviously I was there to help people. So as an immediate responder, we were knocking on doors and speaking to people.
At that point I left the house and left it to everybody, because I know a man who's over the hill and he lives on his own. And he's got heart disease, and I knew he wouldn't have anyone.
They were advising me to try and get everybody out of the houses. The electricity had cut off by this point.
The policeman said I'd take him to the hub, make sure he was all right. And I came back at that point and went to get in, and I couldn't even get down here.
The village was just like a lake when the two rivers actually met, you know, when they got together and the surge of water came.
But the water was here on me, so I couldn't get through the door. All the plants in the garden, which are very big, was actually floating about. So my husband said, come round the back. So I went round the back, and my son and my daughter pulled me through the window.
And then I started getting a phone call sort of every 10 minutes.
It was just constant calls all through Boxing Day.
I think people were shocked in the first place. They turned up and we weren't expecting it.
Then I started to get stock into the back of the shop, take up carpets, we switched off the electricity.
Well, I can't explain it. It's not a fear, it's just a panic and a stressful time, you know, and you're looking around your house and thinking, oh, I'll move that, but you can't, you know, impossibility to move things, you know, in time.
I'm covering the whole of Ribble Valley. I'm realising that I can't respond to every single event that's going on there.
It was flowing to the back of the shop where I'd put the stock. So luckily, we live upstairs. I was able to then move the stock upstairs.
One of our roads, really, it was a river. It wasn't, you know, there was no pavement to be had. Boats were coming down from emergency services.
Christmas trees floating down the street. It was just an area of decimation.
On Boxing Day, you usually either chill out a little bit, don't you, and go to your families and things, but to have everything sort of wiped out on the ground floor, it's devastating.
They were at the family as they were having dinner, and they weren't even in when it happened, so they were saying to me, we've lost everything.
But I wouldn't leave it. I just didn't want to leave the house, so we just decided to stay. We put towels down. I mean, nothing worked. The water was just coming through, so we just decided to go upstairs and stay there in our bedroom.
The next morning, we decided to get as many of our employees as we could to come down and support the people cleaning the houses.
It was just a natural, let's wander down to the village and see how we can help people.
Family turned up, my family, my husband's family, my son, two of his friends, one of them I've never ever met, they didn't even know me.
The community were just totally and absolutely amazing.
In the end we had that many. My sisters and their children said she would go and help somebody else. So they went away and they helped 5 more people clear their house.
They came, they'd been to Tesco's, they had mops, they had brushes, they had milk, they had bread. They were knocking on our doors. People just came from all over just to help us.
Young men coming up to me saying, where can I go, what can I do? Hands and knees, ripping up carpets, taking out people's white goods, sofas.
We opened the crisis centre and we ended up with about 1,000 volunteers coming down.
They set a group up in Ramsbottom in the Grants Arms, and this community spirit was all there, and the people came down from Ramsbottom, Haslingden, people that weren't flooded in the village.
A lot of people had no kitchen facilities, so if you had kitchen facilities then you'd made some soup so that people could at least have something warm, because it was Boxing Day, it was cold and wet.
And then people were coming knocking on your door and offering you takeaway food, pizzas, teas, coffees.
There was about 15 people in the shop that I'd never seen before, helping rip the carpets out.
So volunteers went round, cleaned the houses and moved all the products out into the skips.
And just getting it all outside, and they just kept coming in and out, you know. I'd never even seen half of them before.
We just helped them with anything we could. They were distraught at the time, so we tried to look after their welfare.
We had a lot of help, you know, to get us back up and running within about 4 days, which was quite phenomenal. We traded with concrete floors.
But on the week that followed, and looking at the devastation in the village, I decided that I couldn't go through it again. You know, it was too much, so I decided to close the nursery.
Looking around your house and seeing all your things what you'd had all your lifetime ruined, and you were really down at rock bottom.
As soon as New Year came in, we got everybody involved in terms of our contractors that were working on our Decent Homes programme to get in and start to get all the the items out of the properties to allow them to dry. So we had to take up flooring, remove wallpaper, get contents out of people's properties. So that was very, very quick, and we saw that as a bit of a recovery phase.
So the recovery phase since the flooding, since the Christmas, we've been focusing primarily on bringing our assets back to the condition they were at before the flooding occurred. So that's our number one objective.
The Flood Resilience Grant has been offered by government for a sum of up to £5,000 for a property owner to provide either resilience measures or resistance measures on their property. It's a way in which they can prepare their property for any future flooding.
I've applied and managed to get for the residents £150,000.
Put it in, they accepted it, and I got the money straight away. But on top of that, the Cumbria Foundation Fund topped it up with another 2,000, so I've had 7,000 towards this kitchen.
So a resistance measure would be something like moving the electrical sockets higher. It's an acceptance that your property might flood, but if it does, you can recover quicker.
You're supposed to be resistance or resilience, and I don't do resistance because you can't resist 6 foot of water. There'll be structural damage to the house, so I've gone the resilience route. It took me a long time to think at this time about how am I going to put the house back together, because I just thought I can't be bothered, I can't waste the energy putting it back together to lose it all again. What I've done this time in here is I've tiled the walls, floor to ceiling, using the same technique as the floor because we know that works. And then I've put this stainless steel kitchen in. It's a freestanding stainless steel kitchen, and it can just be washed out. What I've tried to do is put a lot of stuff in baskets in the cupboards so they can just be grabbed, moved upstairs.
The grant continues until March next year, the end of March next year.
I still get people coming in for support. The resilience grant, they don't really understand what a lot of them don't understand what resilience is, and they say, oh, I don't need that. I've had the work done. So
for those property owners that haven't had the opportunity yet to engage with the local authority, to have measures installed on their properties to protect them from future flooding, please give us a call, please contact us, have a survey done of your property, and help or allow us to help you in the future.
Now 6 months on, we've done the majority of the reinstatement works, and fitted. We've probably got another 30 kitchens to open and complete, and then once we've done that, we've finished within them properties.
Recovery's well on the way. Insurance is a little bit of a hassle, I would say, but they're getting there.
We're working together towards a long-term flood defence whilst constantly considering the resilience issues.
We will have a resilience plan delivered to every home, which dovetails into the Ribble Valley resilience plan.
We weren't as prepared as we should have been. It's almost as if we haven't learnt those lessons from 2009.
I hope this to try and set something up so we don't get flooded like that again, or if the water does come over, that it doesn't get in our houses as much. And for us to know that if it did happen again, we've got a community to help each other.
And you've got to make sure that you're not just looking after yourself. You've got to get out and make sure everybody in your area is looked after and safe. On reflection, we need to be better prepared, and that's something we need to work on with other community members, but we need to rely on people who don't flood to help us, and I think that's the big thing I've learnt from it all.
As a resident association, this will be one of my tasks to get a proper record of people and the numbers and emergency numbers.
And tell people phone numbers to ring, where to go, where you'll be taken to, and things like that, as well as having basic equipment to hand.
Possibly carry a stockpile of the sandbags local to them in the village hall or whatever.
The Environmental Agency have been into this village to help our little village. They have been amazing. They've already started in the river with working on the river to working towards slowing the flow into our village.
We've been doing a lot of work around engagement, so we've got a huge programme of work, both engaging with communities to find out what happened in the flooding, because it's not always that easy to understand exactly what happened in each community.
They've also looked at refining the plans to deploy temporary defences so that can be done quicker, more efficiently.
Then it's trying to learn the lessons from that flooding so that we can make things better. The next stage for us is then trying to look at, so where can we put in new defences? So where can we build new defences, or where can we put in more resilience measures for the winter coming up.
But more than that, it's to be prepared, you know, to have your own flood plans and just to talk to your neighbours. You know, the power of community in a flood situation is really quite incredible to see.